Shalom and a very warm welcome to each one of you, our Israel Vision viewers. And this is today's News in Review, a biblical perspective on news events that are emanating out of the Middle East and especially out of Israel and Jerusalem. And today we're going to be talking about the landmark speech last night of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, these are the days of speeches. It was just 10 days ago that Barack Obama sort of shook the world with his amazing speech at the University of Cairo. And last night, Benjamin Netanyahu's 2,000-word speech here at the Begin Sadat Center for Peace in the Bar-Ilan University in Ramat Gan in Israel also was pretty shocking because of some of the issues that he brought up. And we're going to get right into that in just a moment. But before we do, we want to just give you this message. And please don't go away. You'll want to meet my guests. They're very special. My son David and my nephew Paul from Vancouver. Hello, my name is Jay Rawlings, and for 30 years now I've produced films and documentaries as well as TV shows about Israel and her people. Today with IsraelVision.tv, our new broadband internet station, you can join our growing audience and enjoy hundreds of programs and news shows from Israel about Israel, keeping you informed and in touch, and it's for free. Enjoy Israel at your fingertips with www.israelvision.tv. Shalom and welcome back to our Israel News in Review today. And I'm so delighted to have with me Paul Chobaniak, my nephew. Thanks, Paul, for being with us.
Yeah,
and David, my oldest son. Thanks, Dave, for being with us. And today we're talking about the speech of Bibi Netanyahus last night. And I've asked you, Paul, to be with us because you're a Canadian, but you've come over to volunteer with us, and you've been a great blessing, and you've got some very good ideas. And of course, David, my anchor man, he's on here many times with me as we discuss people making a difference and the news and review. So now, this speech last night was pretty important. I mean, he brought up some major points. So for those of you who are viewers and maybe you aren't aware of all the points he brought up, I'd like to go through them one by one, and if we have time to go through as many as we can and discuss them in reality, what is important and isn't, or what is shocking, really. Okay. First of all, maybe I could say this, that, when any politician is trying to get elected, he always gives electoral promises. And one of the electoral promises that Bibi Netanyahu gave when he was, on the campaign trail was that he would never, have or mention about a two-state solution.
Well, he didn't last very long.
So now we have him going back on that promise, and I hope that's the only promise he goes back on. But he's been under a lot of pressure, Dave.
Barack Obama is putting on the thumbscrews.
Yeah.
And but on the other hand, the U.S. administrations have always been anti-settlement, and it was always part of the part and parcel of the roadmap or the Oslo peace process that something had to happen, or some sort of dismantlement of the settlements had to happen. I mean, that's clear from an American point of view, and American perspective.
So what did Bibi say last night about it?
Well, he just said that he won't make any new settlements. He just said that he's going to freeze all settlements, but he's going to allow the settlements to continue building for natural growth. Families grow, so they need another house and things like that. And I think the Americans
Obama doesn't want that.
Well, I think, yeah, but after the speech in its entirety, I think Obama kind of gave him a nod with a little wink and said, okay, we'll talk about this later, kind of thing.
Okay. Now, all of this discussion may be sort of pointless because his very first point in his speech, Paul, was that the root of the conflict, or the greatest danger confronting Israel, the Middle East, and the entire world, and the human race, is the nexus or link between radical Islam and nuclear weapons, of course referring to Iran.
Well, yeah, and I think think that is the major issue right now, is that we've been having the elections in Iran, and it's been worldwide news. Ahmadinejad won the election with, I think, about 66% of the vote, and there's riots in the streets of Tehran and in Iran, and you know, this Ahmadinejad guy is back in power, and
well, why are they rioting?
They're rioting because, for many reasons, you know, they feel that the election was tainted in many ways. And Joe Biden, the American vice president, said it wouldn't, I'm not sure what quote, but he said it wouldn't surprise him if they were tainted.
Yeah, okay.
So
that's kind of a bit worrying. I mean, he's kind of got himself back into power again, and they have this desire to have a nuclear weapon. And we're within, you know, range of their current ballistic missiles.
Exactly. And I should point out, too, is that with Ahmadinejad, I mean, he can spew all he wants, this anti-Israel rhetoric, and it's very disturbing. And the fact that they are working closer and closer to a nuclear program, that is very disturbing. But the other fact is that Iran is a country that is on the brink. And regardless of whether it's Ahmadinejad or this other guy, Mousavi, or somebody else. I mean, you don't know what is going to happen in there. So
well, I mean, touching on that, the Israeli foreign minister said specifically that Israel couldn't care less about the internal elections going on in Iran, whether it was Mousavi or Ahmadinejad who got back into power, or the other guy who wanted to get into power, because very rightly so, the foreign minister of Israel, Lieberman, he said that the problem is the regime. Very, very totalitarian, religious regime. And what we're seeing, and I'm not so afraid right now of Iran, because Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons right now. I am more afraid, though, of what's happening in Pakistan.
Yeah.
But the Pakistanis seem to have things under control with the Taliban, but for how long?
Exactly.
But for how long?
Yeah. Okay, next point. The root of the conflict, this is what Bibi said, President Netanyahu said, Prime Minister, sorry.
Yeah.
The root of the conflict was and remains the refusal to recognize the right of the Jewish people to be a state on their own in their historic homeland, and to recognize that right. So here we are discussing peace and peace negotiations, but Dave, if you have a neighbor that doesn't think you should exist, it's hard to negotiate with that.
Well, it's even more difficult when you have a neighbor that is, say I'm a Palestinians, okay, and my neighbor, I can't stand him, I hate him, and he kind of wants to talk to me, but I hate him so much that I say to myself and my children, he doesn't even exist. But he's right there. Yeah. And he does exist, and the history proves that this nation exists. And we have the Bible because of this nation, and the Bible is for all intents and purposes, is a historical document. Yes, yes. And so the Jewish history is documented there, and their connection to the land is documented there. And with this whole rhetoric from the even moderate Muslims trying to rewrite history, saying that Jews have no intrinsic right to be here. Ever. There were never Jews here. They were always Muslim. I mean, this is something that we really need to discuss, and for just a few seconds or a minute or two, is the rewriting of history that is going on. Because the fundamentalist Muslims, and even moderate Muslims, teach the children that Abraham was a Muslim, Joseph was a Muslim, Moses was a Muslim, King David was a Muslim, Solomon was a Muslim. Yeah. They'll say that, but then they'll also say that Solomon's temple never existed. I mean, and then Jesus was a Muslim. It doesn't make any sense on a historical timeline. It's like they're doing. I'm an editor, and we've gone from linear editing, that means one shot after the next, and you just build it like a sentence, to nonlinear editing, where you can take anything from anywhere and put it in and make a picture like that. Yeah. And that's how they're telling history. They're just pulling, you know, things, and you can't be serious. And in fact, it's insulting, I would think, to the intelligence of all Muslims, not to put things in perspective and in order of what they are. Because if you don't do that, then how can you even take yourself seriously?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, Paul, the next.
So it all goes back to recognition.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So then it says, he said in his speech, the closer we get to an agreement with the Palestinians, the further they retreat and raise the demands that are inconsistent with the true desire to end the conflict. So if you look at, and I'll go on to say that this has to do with territorial withdrawal, and that's another point, the next point. The claim that territorial withdrawals will bring peace with the Palestinians, or at least advance peace up until now, has not stood the test of reality. Let's look for a minute at what happened in Lebanon in the year 2000, and then in the year 2005, when they came out of Gaza. They were big withdrawals, but actually what happened?
Well, in both those situations, you had Hezbollah in the north, and Israel pulled out, and so what did Hezbollah do? They didn't say thank you. Well, they just fired rockets over. It's like, thanks for leaving, here's some rockets, you know?
So it was a victory for the terrorists, actually.
Well, that's how they see it.
And then similarly in the south, what happened?
Same thing, you know, Israel pulls out of Gaza, and Hamas is firing rockets into Sderot, and we have a whole program on that we're working on right now about these rockets falling into Sderot, and not just Sderot, but in Ashkelon and in southern Israel.
Yeah,
it's very difficult.
So the point is that Israel has withdrawn from territories, but it hasn't actually created peace. Why? There must be some reason, and that is because they don't want Israel to exist, and they want all the territory.
Now, we're talking about real fundamentalist Islam here, and they seem to be controlling a lot of things through fear. And what the intelligent West doesn't seem to understand is that they're not going to stop, no matter how much you talk to them. I mean, we are educated in the West to accept the differences, to even embrace the difference that is between us.
I just, you know, commenting on that because this is where I come in from a person growing up in Vancouver. I have Persian friends. I have you know, East Asian, you know, Japanese friends, Chinese friends. I have Filipino friends, and so the concept of, you know, groups not get along is very foreign, and we don't quite understand that there. You figure, well, you know, if we just give them this, they'll be happy and go away. And unfortunately, that's not the mindset of a lot of these radical Islamic groups. It's conversion through conquest. You know, we're in you know, as a Christian, you know, conversion through salvation. It's conversion through conquered lands. And forcing these lands to become Muslim.
For peace.
For peace?
Of course, for peace.
So what were you going to mention, Dave?
Well, I'm just going to mention that there was a Jerusalem Post had an exclusive interview with maverick Dutch politician Geert Wilders. Now, a lot of people call him extreme right, but he's not. He's got 17% of the electorate, and the polls say that he's got even more influence than that. And you know, he has the extreme right, you know, protesting against him. So he's kind of caught. But what I wanted to quote him is this. Wilders says that Israel is the only light of democracy in the Middle East, and that the Islamic war was against us all, meaning Europe and America. The Jewish state was more like a canary in the coal mine, he said, and stressed that an ideological conflict was unfolding in the region. It is not, quote, now I'm quoting him, it is not a territorial conflict. Please forget about this crazy concept. The Islamists see Israel as one big settlement. Mm-hmm. And that's clear. Well, to us it's clear, maybe to our viewers it's not, but that's our reality.
Yeah.
And if Israel gives territory A, for example, then the other side will soon be asking for territory B, meaning Haifa, because everything is a settlement. And so there's a lot of stalling tactics that happen here in the Middle East when it comes to politics and when it comes to peace. There's if I have a feeling like the people on the Muslim side, on the Arab side, really aren't interested in peace. They're interested in talking and stalling and building arms. And I hate to sound like a warmonger, but I just don't trust what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that what Bibi Netanyahu said yesterday was there's three things really that are facing Israel and the world. Was really, first of all, is this nuclear threat. Secondly, is the economic crisis that we're in, and thirdly is the try to get peace in the Middle East through making concessions to the Palestinians. Now, he said that if there could be a demilitarized Palestinian area, and it was they would recognize Israel's right to exist, and they were demilitarized, then he would agree to having this state. Now, this was kind of dangerous for him to say. Why? Because he was threatened the day before by his own Likud party members, the right-wing members of his party, that if he mentioned a two-state solution, they were going to bolt from his, from his party and pull down the government. So he was in a difficult position to even mention this two-state, but he did it very cleverly. He said, if it will be demilitarized, and if it will be...
Well, first, if they recognize...
Well, recognize the right of Israel to exist. And secondly, if it's demilitarized, then we can talk about, first stage being building the economy and having cooperation between Israel. And by the way, Israel has offered this in the past.
I think that's very important. That was, that was the olive branch.
Yeah.
Was he mentioned, we want to help you to build your economy.
Yeah.
And
build jobs and
create jobs, and he mentioned hydroelectric power. He mentioned oil and gas pipelines. All kinds of
desalination plants.
Desalination plants. And he said something that kind of struck me is that it was a strong economy will help the Palestinians.
Yes.
And if they have a strong economy, that will prevent them from...
Now, Dave, thank you. Now, Dave, there was one kind of, what would we call it, a difficult point he brought up about the settlements, not the settlements, the refugees, sorry. We gave some statistics last time. There are many millions of Palestinians living around the world today. There's approximately 9 million Palestinians. Out of that, about 6 million, live outside of Israel or outside of Palestine. And now, the idea is that in this settlement with the Palestinians and between the Israelis and the Palestinians, that the refugees have to have the right to come back. Now, yesterday he said unequivocally it's not going to happen. The only way that there'll be a settlement with the refugees is that it'll be outside of the borders of Israel. What do you think about that?
Well, I think from a demographic point of view, that's the only thing he can say. I mean, the Palestinians have a higher birth rate than the Jews, and they are raising, a generation of Israel haters, and so from that perspective, he's right. And just to think about all of the misplaced Jews that were kicked out of the Arab countries 60 years ago as well, that came here. Totally different climate, totally different area of the world, and they made this place prosper.
Yeah.
And so there's really no reason why the Palestinians and their brothers, the other Arab nations, can't absorb those Palestinian refugees. In fact, the Palestinians are considered the most educated among the Arab nations.
Yeah,
and that would only help. I mean, they're extremely clever. I mean, look, you can only get clever by living in conflict for so many years, because you're forced to think outside of the box and forced to think about how you're going to feed your family, and that gets back to the idea of the economy. I mean, I as a father, If I'm having trouble feeding my children, I am really not in a good state.
Yeah, right.
So,
well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us today. And I'll leave you with a thought that comes from the scriptures. It says that the nations of this world will ultimately drop off the stage of history, but the eternity of Israel will not lie. This is from 1 Samuel 15:29, and will remain true forever. The prophecies of the prophets of truth and justice will come true. And according to Isaiah, not one word of their words will return unfulfilled. And that has to do with the ingathering of the Jewish people back to their own homeland, back to their cities of, that are being rebuilt today. And so God says, he that keepeth Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. And so we can take comfort in that knowledge that above Obama's speech, which was great, and Bibi's speech was also a fine speech, above all of the rhetoric, God is at work in this part of the world, and he will keep his word to his people.
now wait a second, Dad. Let me just read the last paragraph of Bibi's speech.
Okay.
To put things into perspective.
Good.
Okay? He says, if only our neighbors would respond to our call, peace too will be in our reach. I call on the leaders of the Arab world and of the Palestinian leadership to let us continue together on the path of Menachem Begin, Anwar Sadat, Yitzhak Rabin, and King Hussein. Let us realize the vision of the prophet Isaiah, who in Jerusalem 2,700 years ago said, nation shall not lift up sword against nation, and they shall learn war no more.
Amen.
With God's help, we will know no more war. We will know peace. And that's how he ended his speech. That's a very, very positive way to end a speech, I think. But I just hope that that the listeners around the world would take the time to understand that last paragraph.
Any final word, Paul?
I think in the Western world, and I think this speech is more directed to the Western world. He talks to the Arab leaders, but the Arabs, like Hamas, and you've heard rumblings out of the Al-Qaeda camp saying, this is totally illegitimate. We're not going to accept this. I think it was more directed to Obama, the United States, and the Western world, saying, look, we're trying here. This is what we're trying to do. He laid out a plan. This is what we want. And it shows, it's a start. And
Again.
Again.
Well, thank you very much for being with me. I appreciate you very much, Paul and
Thank
Dave.
you.
Thanks,
and
Dan.
ladies and
Paul.
gentlemen, that's our News in Review, giving a biblical perspective on news events from Israel. And thank you very much for being with us. And we look forward to being back with you again real soon. And in the meantime, we wish you and yours every blessing from Jerusalem. And that means shalom. For me, with our planet in crisis, it's an ideal time to point people back to the Word of God for comfort, solace, and guidance. Never before has the Word of God been more meaningful and relevant, especially when it comes from the epicenter of all, Jerusalem.
We at Israel Vision love sending out the good news from the Holy Land. It's here at the very source where the Word was first heard, received, and prophetically pronounced. It is our joy to be your eyes and ears. We are dedicated to giving you real breaking news of ancient prophecies being fulfilled right before our eyes today. The light is being broadcast from Jerusalem 24/7 via our website, www.israelvision.tv.
People are searching. They are surfing the web looking for something meaningful. They're hungry. Last year, Google received 600 million visitors to its site, yet most stayed only 2.5 minutes on any given website. Why? Because they are not getting fed. Statistics show that people visit our website, israelvision.tv, and are staying there 10, 20, 50, even 90 minutes or more. Why? Because there is nutritious food for the mind and soul being taught and opened up in a beautifully creative way.
Join Dr. J and Meredith Rawlings on their special Holy Land Watchman's Prayer Tour 2009.
Visit the biblical sites. Intercede on location over the places at the cutting edge of world current events. Experience the life, ministry, and passion of Jesus the Messiah from Galilee to Jerusalem. Enjoy the natural beauty of God's chosen land. And help fulfill prophecy by planting trees in the wilderness. Explore the historical and spiritual background of Israel's prophetic fulfillment. Join us in 2009.
You will see how the geography of this little land relates to the Bible. And so when you do your Bible studies, then you'll begin to see the land in relation to the miracles that happened here.
Upon your walls, O Jerusalem, I have set watchmen, who shall never be silent by day or night. O you, the Lord's rememberers, take no rest, and give no rest to him, until he establishes Jerusalem and makes her the renown of the earth.